Okay, so in this video I want to start to talk about how we're going to take this texture from our capture that's based on your photos that you took and project it onto this new model that you made using all the retopology techniques that we've talked about so far. I spent a long time making a nice new version of this character the proper way that I've been showing you, and then while I was making one of these demos, Blender crashed and I lost all that data. So this is your reminder to save often and save before you do anything major. Once you finish a big step, save it. So I've kind of recreated it just with some modifiers and stuff. It's not nearly as nice as my other one, but it'll do for this demo. Okay, so what are we doing here exactly? Well, this texture that we have is basically just a 2D image that's kind of mapped onto our 3D object. And we can see that pretty easily with our photogrammetry capture here. If I click on it, and then up here at the top where I have these different tabs, I can click into my UV editing tab. And this is going to show me that texture that I just talked about, this 2D image on the left side and my model on the right. If you want, you can click through different shading modes to see your character here. And if I press the A key to select all, you can see that how this model is mapped onto this texture. There's lots of little shards of polygons all over the place. And so how the photogrammetry software really works is it kind of sliced up our model into these small pieces and then projected these pictures onto it like that. So we need to do the same thing with our new model here. Right now it does not have that mapping at all. Depending on how you did it, the mapping might look kind of different. For mine, all of these triangular faces are mapped onto the same place right here. So if I was using this texture to color this object, it's really not going to look right. It's going to have this triangle of the texture repeated all over it. So what I need to do is make a new mapping and a new texture for this new object. So we'll get started just by making this new mapping. So just to start with, just so we have a basis, we can use the default kind of automatic UV unwrapping. So I'll click UV. If I just click unwrap, it's not going to do a very good job. There's a lot of overlapping geometry inside of here. So instead what I recommend is at least starting with the Smart UV Project. And you can leave these settings alone. A lot of the time this is just fine. So I'll click OK. And you can see now it's broken this thing down into smaller pieces where the triangles are similar in size. There's not some that are way bigger than others or anything like that. Obviously this does not map onto that underlying texture that you can see there. If I start to select some of these faces on the knight's shield, for instance, you can see that they're over here. They're not anywhere near the shield in the texture. That's okay. There's going to be another step where we project the texture on this model into a new layout on this model, and we'll get into that later. For now, let's set this thing up also with a material and a new texture to kind of bake our old texture into. So for that, we're going to go over to another one of these tabs at the top. This is going to be the shading tab. So Blender has its own rendering engine, just like Unity or Unreal or any 3D software, and it needs something called a material for each object. So my photogrammetry capture here has its own material, and it uses this kind of graph-based editor. It's generated a very simple material. It just has basically a texture input here going into this base color node. So we need to do that same thing for our new model down here. So here is my little king guy. If I want, I can click on it and I can open this tab right here. This is the material properties for this object. Also with it selected, I can work in here as well. So I need to add a new material to this object. I can click here or I can click here to do that. So I'll just do that. I guess I'll call this a topo mat, something like that. And you can see now it's I can edit this material here. I can also edit it here. I I can adjust its base color, and you can see that's changing the way it's rendering. However, I think I just want to leave it white. And we'll add that texture node. So I'll go to add texture, and then Blender gives us a lot of different kinds of textures, but we want an image texture. So this is a texture that's generated from an image file as opposed to some other noise algorithm or something like that. And I can click and drag the color kind of node here up to the shader's base color. You can see that turn my model black. That's because there's no texture input here. So I'll go ahead and click the New button here. This is the slot for where this image texture is going to live. I'll click the New button, and I have some settings that I can play with here. I'll call this albedo, which usually just means the surface color of an object. I'll turn off the alpha channel. I don't need any transparency. You can increase the resolution of the texture if you want. I'll probably do, I don't know, 2048. It depends kind of on the application that you're working for, but usually 1024 or 2048 is pretty good, especially for things like game engines. You'll notice that it's good to have these be square and in a power of 2. It's kind of helpful for the graphics card to process it faster. And then down here we have generated type. So I could have it be blank black to start with, or I could use one of these other kind of pre-made textures. So a color grid or a UV grid is going to be helpful for me to understand the UV mapping of my model. So I'll start with that, and then we can override it later with the texture from our other model. And then once I've got that all set up, I'll click OK. And now you can see that my model has this texture pasted all over it that has this kind of bright colors. I think I can also click this little drop down to open it here as well. So that's what that colorful UV map looks like. It's got a kind of grid of colors with little letters all over it to indicate the size. So I can see, for instance, the shield mostly looks okay, except that there's some of these other chunks inside of it. Yeah, I've got a few little fragments that are all over the place. So in general, for like one surface, we want it to be all one piece of the texture. So maybe this is sitting right on top of here, but then there's a few parts of it I can see by this green, by this purple, that are off somewhere else in the texture map. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can fix that. Hopefully this is not too crazy. So we'll go back to our UV editing tab here, and then select all this, and now you can really tell what's happening here. And then let me change what's in this viewport here, like that. So as I'm selecting these faces, you can see these are all over here in this yellow area. If I select these ones in the red, these all look like they're more or less together, not quite touching. But then some of them are not where I want them to be. Some of them, because of how the automatic mapper works, got put over here. Some of them are kind of stretched in weird ways. So we can manually create our UV maps as well. So to do this, we need to basically use our edge select tool. And I'll leave the shaded view here. I'll go back to this view. And what we need to do is basically select edges of our mesh that we want it to cut automatically. So this is one of the reasons why if you have those nice square edge loops, it's a lot better for you. I don't have that, so my automatic edge loop selection is not going to work here. But I will, do the best that I can with what I've got, and just go around selecting an edge loop here for this shield, like so. So once I've got some edges that I want to make a cut into selected, I can press Control E, and then I can select Mark Seam, and that's going to color them red. So I can still move these around, they're still connected together, but as far as the UV mapping, the texture mapping goes, it's going to consider this a seam in the texture. So now if I select all these faces on this shield, actually, if I select all, you'll see this working already. and then I just click UV unwrap, you can see I've got two pieces here. One that's the whole rest of the mesh, kind of all spiraling into this super dense point. And then I've got one over here, oops, which is my shield. There's my shield. And then this is all this other stuff. So you can see how the default just basic UV unwrap really messes this model up. If I go back to my shading view, we're getting a lot of density right down here for some reason, and then it's totally spread out, getting kind of chunky and pixely up here. But at the very least, my shield is all one piece, so that's good. That's what we want it to look like for the most part. So we can go back in and keep doing this for the rest of our model. One thing that I want to point out, maybe I'll do another loop around the bottom of this shield here, so that you can see what I'm going to talk about here. So I'll just quickly kind of select an edge loop going all the way around this shield. Again, this is going to be a lot easier if you have those nice quads. Unfortunately, I don't. Oh, okay, I want to move it down like this. Because then you can just press the Alt key while you click on these to select the whole edge loop. But I am SOL as far as that goes, so I just have to kind of patiently click and move around. Okay, so I've got another edge loop selected here. I'll press Control E. I'll select Mark Seam. Note you can also use a clear seam to get rid of a seam. So this is kind of a ring shape around this little strip here. Sometimes that's all right. I'll just try it, UV unwrap. That's okay, but it's going to give me a much better result if instead of having this be a ring, I make it into a kind of strip that comes apart. So I can just select one of these edges that goes across, Control E, Mark Seam, and I'll unwrap it again. And now you can see it's created this nice strip. I might even do it again somewhere else because it still is making pretty tiny little shapes here. And this is kind of a weird curving arcing shape. So I'm going to do this, Control Edge, Mark Seam, UV, oops, UV unwrap. There you go. So now I've got a couple of pieces here, two parts of the kind of outer edge of my shield, and then the front of the shield. Yeah, so these islands, if you want to call them that, can be quite large. For instance, I might do one for the entire back of this cape here. I guess I can do that really fast. I'll just go down around the outer edge here. Ooh, I can see some kind of messy geometry here. Let's see if I can clean that up a little bit while I'm here. Oh yeah, okay. I'll just merge these together at center. There we go. Yeah, that's something you can also do while you're working on this UV mapping stuff. So I'm going to just click through here. And yeah, you may not need to even do this if your unwrap is cleaner than mine, then, you know, you don't need to do it. So yeah, I'll just click in a big patch around the back of this cape. I'll try to follow some kind of contour that's logical here to have it be one shape. Oh, maybe this one here makes more sense. And obviously it's still pretty messy. Oh, maybe I do want to kind of wrap around more to here. It's tricky because this mesh is such a mess, but yeah. And you know, there's in general, there's not really one right way to do this. I can see I've got some things that would be a problem there if I'm going to 3D print. But there's not one correct way to do this, really. You'll see people, like professional 3D artists, maybe have some conventions they like to follow, just for convenience sake. But whatever works, basically, is the only real rule here. So I'm going to just come around under this section of the top of the cape here, and then do Control E, Mark Seam, and then I can unwrap it like that. Whoa, maybe I'm missing something in here. No, okay, so there's my shield, there's the back of my cape, there's some other pieces. I'll keep going with this before I make my next little video here, but that should get you started. At least you don't need to watch me do this whole thing.